I feel like you could move on to ferret. Ferrets are intense. They're always like... weird animals.
What the hell is even that?
Yes, I had to get a cushion because I like my butt to be comfortable. Welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. The worst punishments from history. I, as always, am your...
Yo, holy shit, he dead!
Got a bit of a sore throat today.
Oh, he dead for sure!
I used to be able to do this thing, and I just felt like doing it now, but I can't do it anymore, where I would be able to, like, jet, like, I'd take a sip of water, and then be like, tss, and I'll be able to spray the water out of my front teeth in, like, a perfect little water jet stream. And I'd always be using this, like, at school, just be like, tss, and you're just like, you know, just a tiny little, perfectly aimed zap of water at someone. Tss, tss. You could use it all the time, and it was brilliant. And then I had my teeth fixed, and they closed the gap. It's the thing I miss the most.
I am disgusted.
We're talking about the worst punishments in history. Oh, with this already led to, I'm sorry, we'll just get into it. Danny writes it, I read it. Sam is gonna add in some of the finest memes that you've ever seen.
Not sure. Is this correct?
I had no idea that the US was still hanging people in 1996. Admittedly, not very often. When convicted murderer Billy Bailey was hanged in Delaware, he was only the third person to be hanged in the US since 1965, and he unusually chose the punishment over lethal injection. There's no... I don't know, man. Lethal injection, when it goes wrong, it seems to really go wrong. Whereas hanging, I feel like they're not gonna get that wrong. We know how to do that. Rope around the neck. Boom! Big old drop, and then that's it.
Holy shit.
And even if you do end up just being suffocated to death by the rope, I feel like I'd still choose that over a lethal injection gone wrong, because that seems like a nightmare. I'd still choose just like firing squad. I'd be up for firing squad, 100%. If someone was like, we got to execute you, whistle boy, I'd be like, oh my God. Can I choose firing squad? Hopefully the answer be yes. God damn. Morbid.
That's no good.
I suspect if you want more morbid content, I've got a show called The Casual Criminalist. We've probably had this very discussion before. I suspect that he wanted to go out with a bang, and with public disembowelment not being an option, this was the next best bet. Bill Bailey is now likely to be the last person to ever receive such a fate in the US, but even 50 years earlier, when convicted rapist Rainey Bethea became the star attraction of the last ever public hanging in the United States in 1936, he must have felt a bit disgruntled that hanging was already a pretty outdated and unreliable form of execution. The problem with hanging is that it can get a bit messy and embarrassing if even the slightest miscalculation is made over the weight of the person, the rope, the trapdoor, and several other key factors. Sometimes the long drop wouldn't quite be long enough, and the convict would end up getting very slowly strangled to death instead of receiving the merciful, swift neck snap. If the long drop was a bit too long, the victim's head might get sliced off and go bouncing into the baying crowd. Oh my God. I did not think of that one. I was always like, yeah, if it's too long, then
That's no good.
I was always like, yeah, if it's too long, then you're just gonna get extra snapped? Nope. That is fucking intense. I'm surprised this didn't inspire a jolly custom in which the first person to catch the head is destined to be the next in line to face a hanging. Holy Daddy. So, towards the end of the latter part of the 19th century, it was decided that hanging needed a more effective makeover. And the obvious solution was to turn everything on its head with an all-new reverse hanging. Oh my God, no. Are you like attaching a rope to someone's neck and then like pulling a big weight or something because they're upside down? No. I initially guessed that this might involve hanging the convict upside down by his feet, but this would clearly just be silly. Oh, I'm sorry, Danny, that's also what I thought. It seems pretty sensible to think that. No, the idea behind the upright jerker was that instead of dropping the condemned down into the trapdoor, it would toss them into the air like a ragdoll. A cord would be wrapped around the convict's head as usual, but a complex system of weights and pulleys would jerk him or her into the air with the mass force against their neck, which would instantly break their body in a visually spectacular demonstration of the hangman's fracture. Oh my God, why? I know hanging's broken, but this is not the solution. Well, that was the idea anyway. In practice, many of these necks weren't snapped at all, and the condemned were often left limply hanging around until they eventually succumbed to spluttering asphyxiation. Prohibition-era celebrity criminal Jared Chapman, the first ever man to be dubbed Public Enemy #1, took a whole 9 minutes to die via the upright jerker in 1926. Who the proved this shit? Why didn't we try it on some, monkeys or some shit first? Was Peter around back then? Hopefully not. Dicks. Stop telling me that it's wrong to taste animals when they taste so right. To taste animals. Can't even get it right. To eat animals when they taste so good. The method was briefly popular in Connecticut, where a prison warden of the local state prison had obtained a patent for his version of the automatic gallows in 1895. But following criticism, the sentence was hideous, brutal, and ineffective. It was eventually withdrawn from use in the 1930s after the electric chair had become the connoisseur executioner's more tasteful, if less lively, preference. Performance. It is a performance, but that's a preference. The electric chair could at least include a rocket-powered ejector seat feature or something, but it seems that nobody is willing to have fun anymore. Still, if you fancy a go on the upright jerk and novelty fairground ride today, just try breaking the law in Iran, where they still use a slightly more advanced version for serious offences such as waging war against God. Oh my god, I can never go to Iran, Simon.
What will you do, Father? I will have my revenge!
A few moments later.
Do not deny me my revenge!
I'll just be like, at the pub, at the pub. So I don't know what Iran is like, but I guess they're not super into drinking. But I'll be there, and I'll be like, oh, fucking hell, Jesus Christ. And they'll be like, get him in the automatic jerker! He has sinned against God. I was out for dinner once with an American friend of mine. We were out as a group, and we were fairly toasty. And I use blasphemy. It's part of what I do. I'm like, oh God, Jesus Christ. It's like for me, damn it. For me, it's like instead of saying f***, which I also love, but it's slightly less offensive. And this dude is like, and he's still a friend of mine, but this was so bizarre. He's like, can you not use Jesus' name? And I'm like, good one, mate. And I know he's religious, but I'm still like, and he's like, no, I'm serious. And I'm like, really? And I tried, because he's my mate and I don't want to offend him. I tried for about 5 minutes and then I was like, Jesus Christ, this is way too difficult. Also, Jesus. Really, my dude? Really? I don't care that much. Ratus Norvetchikursabus. The twisted minds who dream up these elaborate forms of torture and execution often make the mistake of overcomplicating everything. There might be more than one way to skin a cat, and you're probably still better off picking up a sharp knife than trying to invent a USB-powered automatic cat skinning machine. Danny, we did make Rotten Turtle when you said that I cannot sell a perfume called Rotting Turtle. And here it is, and its follow-up. Here it is, and its follow-up, Rotting Badger. Oh, don't breathe it directly in, Simon. Why would you do that? Don't sniff so deeply. It smells fantastic, though. So maybe we could make a USB-powered cat skinning machine. Maybe a bit weird, but we could.
These are the things, the telltale sign of somebody that's going to become a serial killer.
We had a ticking time bomb on our hands.
And one of the most effective torture methods in history is also one of the simplest. All you need is a live rat, a bucket, a candle, and perhaps a strong stomach. Oh my god, you're no stomach. I know this one. No stomach is strong enough. Rat torture dates back to ancient Rome, but is still alleged to have been used by South American military dictatorships as recently as the 1980s. How has this not been in a Saw movie? Jesus. The victim is, maybe it has. I stopped watching Saw when I decided I'm not a sicko anymore.
So maybe we could make a USB-powered cat skinning machine. Maybe a bit weird, but we could.
A serial killer.
The victim is strapped down to a table and some form of metal bucket or cage is placed onto their bare abdomen, which has already received deep cuts and scratches in the preparation phase. This bucket isn't empty though. It's got a starving live rat inside it. And life for the rat is swiftly going to get too hot to handle as the outside of the bucket or cage is slowly heated with either a candle or hot coals. You could probably get away with using a blowtorch today. I'm glad you thought this through, Danny. And if the life of the rat is about to get a bit sweaty, life of the victim is destined to get considerably sweatier. Faced with no other escape route from the rising temperature, the hungry rat will have no option but to gnaw its way through the guts of the victim using the pre-prepared lacerations as a tempting starting point for a quick nibble. By the end of the barbaric procedure, the rat will have become so consumed by panic that it will have ripped through your flesh, organs, intestines, and ultimately your bowels on its quest for freedom. I know about this one, but it's so f***ed up. Holy shit. Jesus Christ! During the Dutch War of Independence of the 16th and 17th centuries, Northern Holland governor Dietrich Sonoy charged 8 of his own men with conspiracy and sentenced them to death by rat torture. And more recently, between 1964 and 1990, South American military governments and intelligence agencies are alleged to have used rat torture as an interrogation technique, but with a modern spin on the ancient concept. For example, the military junta in control of Argentina during the Dirty War. Oh my god, I just made a video about this morning. A whole video about the Dirty War for Into the Shadows. It was intense. They tortured Jewish prisoners with a method which also included a big telescopic tube which would lead the starving rats directly into the victim's anus. What the up to, Argentina? Holy That could be considered a bit more merciful, as it probably sped things up a fair bit, but although we see depictions of the rat torture play out in such classic works of fiction as The Pit and The Pendulum, 1984, and Fast and Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious. Really? I feel like I've seen Too Fast, Too Furious. That was the last movie I walked out of in the cinema. I went to see like Fast and Furious 19 or whatever. And I'm like, this is so... I was there with my friends who were like, they loved it. And it was also a bit like, they brought like 70 Coronas. And it was like the premiere. It was like the premiere. It was a big event. The cinema was packed and people were rowdy. And people getting rowdy is not a thing in European cinemas. And it was intense. And I was just like, this is too much for me. I'm leaving. There aren't too many documented accounts of real-life victims reaching the horrific final stages. When the rat torture was being deployed as an interrogation technique rather than a punishment, it's perhaps likely that the scenario never quite played out that far. Or maybe this was all just a bit much for even the most sadistic and depraved of executioners who would have preferred to at least start off with a hamster or a guinea pig. I feel like you could move on to ferret. Ferrets are intense. They're always like... weird animals.
What the hell is even that?
The White Room. This one actually sounds like quite peaceful in a way. No live rats, no neck snapping, not even the slightest hint of physical violence, not so much as a Will Smith slap. Timely. And yet, the long-term effects of white torture can be more brutal than most, and it's alleged that the practice is still secretly carried out today. The psychological torture method involves banging up a suspect in a totally soundproof white room in which the walls and furnishings and beddings are all painted completely white. Neon tubes are strategically planted across the room to prevent any falling shadows. Your clothes are white, even your food is white. So I'm assuming that rice is a regular dish on the lunchtime menu, maybe sprinkled with a bit of garlic and milk. Doesn't actually sound too bad. Garlic, I love garlic. And the silent guards in white uniform wear white padded shoes to avoid making the slightest sound. Often used as a way of getting detainees to sign confessions or provide information, the idea is that the complete sensory deprivation will cause the detainee to experience a slow mental breakdown in which they effectively become lost in their own heads. Good lord. It's like one of those Black Mirror episodes which completely just... I think I stopped watching Black Mirror after it. It was with Don Draper. Not Don Draper. What's his name? Goddamn, what's his name? Don Draper's... doesn't matter. And he's like put in this prison for like 3,000 years or whatever, where it's just like he's just in a room and it's like Christmas or some shit. And it's just playing this song over and over again. And he's been sentenced to be in there for like 3,000 years. And I'd be like, this would be insane. And he's like, it's just in his brain, so he's kept like young. And he'd be like, yeah, but also you'd lose your mind. After like, how long would it take? The worse it is, the faster you'll lose your mind, and then you'll just become insane. And then at least you're not aware, right? Because you're insane. Oh my god, I didn't like that at all. The first official report of white torture involved the Iranian prisoner Amir Fakrava, who was prosecuted in 2002 for campaigning against the Iranian government. Fucking Iran! What are you up to, Iran? No more going to Iran. I never went to Iran. I used to know someone who was Iranian. They were really nice. He was locked up in... What a surprise, Simon. It's like when you got a country like North Korea. I'm sure 99% of North Korean people are lovely. And it's just, unfortunately, their government's an enormous piece of shit. Probably the same for Russia. Sure, although Russia, they say they get fed so much propaganda. So do the North Koreans. But like, whenever you meet someone from a country, there's some like intense country, they're always like super nice. And it's like, yeah, because they're just people. And their government's insane.
Duh.
He was locked up in the White Room for several months and became paranoid as he suffered from mental hallucinations and began to forget the faces of his family.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
He later claims that he would have preferred to have died a painful death than to suffer the merciless, dehumanizing, never-ending whiteness, and he still finds it impossible to sleep without pills to this day. Yeah, but it's better than the guy who like died of an infection after a rat chewed through his anus, isn't it? I can't sleep without pills. Yeah, I mean, so got a lot of people. You didn't have a rat in your anus. And although most of the reports of white torture emanate from Iran and Venezuela, it's been alleged that the US used very similar enhanced interrogation tactics in Guantanamo Bay under George W. Bush. Thankfully, nobody has died from the torture, but the mental scars of losing your identity ensures that no one ever left the White Room in quite the same way as they walked in, and it's possibly the only situation imaginable in which an extended Yoko Ono playlist on YouTube might actually provide welcome relief for the human brain. No, I'd just rather have utter silence. I'd rather just listen to my own insane howls. Rock the boat. Perhaps one of the most barbaric punishments in history is credited to the ancient Persians, who clearly had far too much time on their hands. Isn't Persian modern-day Iran? What the fuck, Iran? The execution is known as scaphism. It's also known as the boats. It could take as long as 3 weeks to get the desired results, and it involved an awful lot of pissing about. In fact, it involved an awful lot of bodily fluids in general. To kick things off, the condemned would be strapped naked to either a big boat or a hollowed-out tree trunk, so that only his head, arms, and feet were poking out in the baking sun, a bit like an upside-down tortoise. God, I know this one, and it's not. Like, upside-down tortoise is a really nice way of describing this. It's about to get fucking horrible. Trigger warning, you are warned. He would then be force-fed milk and honey, which would also be drizzled over his naked body and face. That might not sound bad if you've got a taste for either milk or honey, but the problem with the diet is that it would eventually lead to bouts of diarrhea, and it wasn't like you were going to be getting an opportunity to visit a public restroom. Indeed, you'd have to wallow in your own filth and wait for all of the insects and bugs to take interest in this surprise boat-shaped banquet of sweetness and shit.
He shit everywhere! Look what he did! He shit all over the wall!
The creepy crawlies would begin to burrow into the human skin and lay eggs in any available orifice. But the most disturbing part of scaphism is that the executioners wouldn't just allow you to die of dehydration or starvation, they would keep on filling you up with yet more milk or honey, so you get your strength up so that you could really enjoy the sensation of being eaten alive from the inside by thousands of insects and larvae over the course of a few weeks. You were ultimately destined to be devoured, unless you were lucky enough to die from madness or septic shock or exposure or sting wounds before the final fatal bite. This is so f***ed up. Iran, take note.
Don't do it.
Now, we're going right back to the 5th century BC with this one, so proper documented evidence is difficult to come by as nobody was able to film such an event and post it onto YouTube. Dude, if someone filmed that event and put it on YouTube, they'd be banned so fast. The most famous example is documented by in Parallel Lives by Greek Roman Middle Platonist philosopher Plutarch. Can't we just say Plutarch, Danny? Why do I have to read off like Greek Roman Middle Platonist philosopher? It's Plutarch. We know he's a philosopher. We don't know where he came from. We don't care. Who tells the story of a cocky soldier called Mithridates who got drunk at a party and accidentally let slip that he'd killed the brother of Persian king Artaxerxes. If you've killed the king, you shut your mouth until you die. Okay? Take note, future king killers.
Who's that?
Jamie fucking Lannister.
The Persian king had already felt secretly pleased that his brother and rival to the throne was out of the picture, but Mithridates was meant to have kept his mouth shut. His punishment for being a blabbermouth was death by scaphism, a procedure which took 17 days in all. The issue here is that Parallel Lives was written hundreds of years after the events, and Plutarch was an anti-Persian who may have been keen to portray the Persians as monstrous savages. Recording of history in the past. So there's no concrete proof that scaphism was ever really carried out, or if it was just the invention of a warped philosophical mind. But thankfully, this is one potential method of execution which never enjoyed a revival in more recent millennia, not even in modern-day Iran. However, this in Iran. Most of the things I've learned about, the biggest thing I've learned in today's video, don't go to Iran! However, this might be considered a mild disappointment for Billy Bailey, the last man to be hanged in the US in 1996 when he was filling in his preferred method of execution. Lethal injection? Don't waste my time. Hanging? A bit passé, my dear. Scaphism? Now you're talking my language, honey! Get it, honey? Danny, legends, thank you! This has been an episode of Brain Blaze. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, why not? Link below. See you next time.
A few moments later.
Do not deny me my revenge!